There's this tendency as therapists of wondering if the client can handle it, feeling almost responsible for their feelings.
He was chasing greatness, but somewhere along the way, he lost himself.
If you got a good enough read on your client and you have that rapport, those spicy interventions kind of breaking through the veneer.
Michael Ceely shares what no one tells young men. The pursuit of perfection can leave you completely empty.
What are you using your sport for? Sometimes it's just purely the love of it, but oftentimes I used it as a form of escape. If I don't exercise, I'm a grumpy person. I'm still addicted to exercise, but it's a much healthier level.
This episode dives into the cost of tying your identity to your performance and how to rebuild a life from the ashes of success.
We're wired to be predators. We're wired to go hunting. If you deny that physical reality, it gets bottled up. You get ashamed of it. But if you can just be true to it in a proper venue, it feels good to get that aggression out.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Mark Azulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Azulay, and I'm here with Michael Ceely. He is the host of the High Performance Man podcast. I was actually a guest on that recently, yesterday. We recorded. He's a therapist out of California, and he works with high-performing guys, athletes, guys that are struggling with workaholism. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Mark, good to see you again.
Yeah, so I'm excited to continue our conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you yesterday, and now we'll kind of turn the table. So let's start with you, right? So what got you into doing some of this work?
Yeah, I think initially I had the good fortune of having a fantastic therapist when I was 15 years old, and I was just getting involved in bicycle racing at the time. And I was kind of getting a little bit of trouble being a rowdy teenage boy, going to punk rock shows, having a good time, getting a little bit of trouble. So my parents sent me to therapy, and at the time, it was exactly what I needed. And I remember my therapist Gary said something really powerful to me in therapy at one point. I was just starting to get really good at bicycle racing, and I got like ninth place in this fairly big race, and wanted to impress him, and I told him about it, like, hey, I got ninth place. Here's how the race went. And to my surprise, he sort of had this mocking clap and was kind of used this very powerful reaction.
With the golf clap on that one?
He was just like, wow, great job. And I was just like taken aback. And it was one of the like tough love kind moments. And he said, why didn't you win? And no one had ever really challenged me like that. People were like, do the best you can. My parents, definitely supported me, but no one had really intervened on me that way in a really supportive, challenging, tough love kind of way. And after that session, I was just going after it in the races. I was just motivated beyond belief. And really, Mark, that moment made me think like, maybe I could do this someday. It's like after bike racing, because I pursued bike racing as a profession, and that just always stuck in my mind. Like, that was such a powerful intervention. It really helped me so much. Maybe I could do that. And that was always in the back of my mind. And that finally came to fruition. Like, after I stopped bike racing, I pursued that path of psychology, psychotherapy. But really that therapist was sort of like the seed was planted there, and it was really powerful. So that's really how we got into what I do today.
Yeah, tell me about that. I am so curious about that because when I think of, we talked a little bit on your show that like, I'm a nerd, so I didn't really grow up with organized sports or anything like that. I do CrossFit now, so that's kind of my dipping my toe into that world of competitive anything. But when you tell your story, I guess my stereotype is that it's often the opposite, right? I think of like, athletes are often driven really hard, and not given validation or encouragement for when they don't, get first. But it sounds like your experience was the opposite. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the power of it was he wasn't my coach, so he wasn't there, on a daily basis motivating me. We had more that psychotherapeutic relationship, and coaches I had had prior to that were, like you say, kinda typical coaches. Maybe I had, like, a wrestling coach in middle school who was, like, very, type A, yelling at us and stuff like that. A little bit of hazing,
Yeah,
and I
sure.
think that yeah, and that has its power and definitely value, and we could tell that he cared. So, I mean, ultimately, the technique maybe is secondary, but it's more like, does that person or coach care? Um, but with this guy, Gary, my therapist, I it was such a, like, out of left field, right? It's and those types of interventions where it really forces you to think and gets you out of that usual modality. So that was new for me, for sure, and, you know, in that particular session, he he really just leveled up my standards. Oh, and another thing he said too was, he's clapping me, he's mocking me, right? And he says, "You're playing it safe." And I was like, "Wow, okay, let's talk about that." And so that just really opened up the pipeline, like, it's okay to fail. Like, why are you getting, ninth or 8th place, and why don't you just go for it? And then if you fail and get last place, at least you tried. So that was the first time I was exposed to that sort of go for it mentality, or like the fail forward mentality. So that was definitely opened up the pipeline for me, and also inspired me, starting about last year. I'm writing a book now too, and the book is about what I call accidental mentors, people who show up in your life and will say something like that. And I have a number of them in this book, and this guy Gary is one of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that story for a number of reasons, and I think, you know, it's a real masculine form of counseling. And I hope our listeners can hear that like therapy could look like that too. Could look like someone giving you like a mocking golf clap and calling you out, but from a place of complete respect and compassion, right? It sounds like that was like right place, right time, right intervention where it really worked for you and really highlighted a much deeper psychological structure, you know. And I think for a lot of guys, we think therapy is just a pity party or is just, people saying, "Oh my God, that's so hard," or always just validating you. So I love that you came on the show and shared that story that like, yeah, therapy can be way more than just what you see in the movies kind of thing.
Yeah. I think you're right on with that, as sort of like a masculine therapy intervention. Like, I can't envision, um, a woman therapist doing that.
No.
I mean, maybe, maybe, but he knew that I could handle it, right? And I had enough of a rapport at the time. I'd been seeing him for like 6 months. Um, but it's those kinds of things I think men really, enjoy in therapy, is like, to be real with me. Don't be super compassionate because everyone else is doing that. Like, give me something kinda new that you think I can handle. But yeah, you're right on with that. It's like, yeah, more of like a male therapist intervention.
Yeah. So how do you bring that into your work? Is that something that you trained on or think about, or how do you bring in those more like yeah, I don't know, let's say like spicy interventions, I guess. There's a word for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do that in my therapy as well, and also in my coaching too. And really, rapport is the key. Like, you gotta have enough rapport with the person, enough trust and, like, feeling of safety to do that. Like, maybe not the first session, you might turn somebody off. Um, but I think that is a powerful intervention, because there's this tendency as therapists, and maybe you experience this too, of, wondering if, like, the client can handle it, like, or feel as the therapist feeling almost responsible for their feelings. It's like, I don't wanna off-put them, or, yeah, again, maybe they can't handle it, but if you got a good enough read on your client and you have that rapport, those kinds of spicy interventions can really just be like that breakthrough, to kind of breaking through the veneer. So they're powerful. You just got to know if it's appropriate to use with the particular client.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like psychodynamic work, and they talk about those like dystonic interventions, and it is the rapport, and it is remembering that like as therapists, we're seeing people at their most vulnerable, But when they're out in the world, they're probably, like, way tougher, than how they appear in the room. So it is trusting them, and like I said, kind of, like, couching it in that love and compassion, right? That, like, yeah, this is for your own good in some ways. Well, I'm curious about you, right? You work a lot with athletes, and that is a demographic that I don't work a ton with. I actually have a guy, Eric, from my company, who does work with them specifically. He's an ultra runner, so probably actually very similar to your story, growing up like a mega endurance athlete. But I'm curious just to kind of dig in on that. Like, what issues do you see these high performance athletes come to therapy for? What are they struggling with?
Yeah. Well, similar to me, the reason why I got involved in bike racing when I was a teenager was my parents were getting divorced. We had moved to another city. Like, there's a lot of things that I was using athletics for. I loved it, of course, but at the same time, it was sort of like a way of self soothe and maybe even avoid things. Certainly better than like turn into drugs, but at the same time, like it can be an addiction. You can be an exercise addict too and use that as a form of escape or avoidance. So the athletes I work with, I look at that factor, like what was the initial sort of maybe reasons why you got into your sport. Oftentimes it is, yes, I just simply love the sport, but there could be some other things there as well that might be hindering the athlete. Let's say for just purely performance, I'm looking for what does failure mean to you? What does success mean to you? Did you do it for your parents, to please your parents or to please a coach or something like that? I look for some things like that if someone's blocked on a performance level. If it's more of like a psychotherapeutic type of relationship, and maybe they're having some issues with anxiety or depression or relationship issues, and they're an athlete, I'll look for, again, what was that? Was there a self soothing thing that you use with your sport, or an avoidance thing that you use for your sport to not look at things that need to be taken care of. So look at that perspective, like what are you using your sport for? Sometimes it's just purely the love of it, but oftentimes, and like I know this for myself, I used it as a form of escape. And even today, like to be honest with you, if I don't exercise for like a couple days in a row, I'm a grumpy person. Like you don't want to be around me. So I'm still addicted to exercise, but it's a much healthier level. But I do know that I'm really wired to go out there and do something kind of pretty intensely physical, at least every couple of days. So.
Yeah, so I'm curious for the people that are doing it for performance, right? For their parents or, coping. Does that get in the way of how skilled they can become at the sport? Like, do the psychological demons come back and show up as self-sabotage or something? Or what do you see as kind of the knock-on effects of that type of motivator?
Yeah, it can be come back and haunt you for sure. So let's say that an athlete got involved in a particular sport, say in their youth. Let's say baseball. So, like the cliche, like the little league dad who, played baseball, didn't quite make it, puts, all the vicarious experience in his son, yells at the ump, is kind of one of those type of parents. Let's use that hypothetical. So that if and let's make it a little more complex. Let's say that the kid actually really loves baseball too. But there is this sort of insertion of the parent in that mix of, I'm doing this initially, or I did this initially for my dad's love, because that was the only sort of venue where I could really connect with my dad. And let's say maybe this might come back to haunt this athlete with, let's say he's in a batting slump. And so on a deeper psychological level, that means that I'm letting my dad down, possibly, right? Or even deeper, dad doesn't love me unless I'm batting 300, right? So these are the things that could be, uncovered through psychotherapy and going on in the background, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I would imagine, yeah, if there's that extra emotional layer of disappointing your father, it makes getting out of that slump way more difficult because it's not objective, right? It's not a coaching problem or a training problem. It's like an emotional problem.
Yeah, yeah, and that shows up in physiology too, so that if, you can see that maybe he's up to bat and he's feeling really down on himself, and you can just see it in the posture too. So it's a lot of the work I do in my performance coaching is looking at actual physiology, like the somatic part. Like, how are you when you're talking about something, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm batting 260," and that's I'll even point that out, like, "What did you just do with your posture right there? What does that mean?" Right? And oftentimes, you can not just access change through psychology and talk therapy, but doing something somatically. So I'll say, like, um, "Tell me again that you're batting at 260, but with a powerful, proud posture." And they'll describe it again, and, like, their brow will furrow, and "This feels weird." It's like, "Well, you're telling me the same thing, but what's going on in your body is that you're in control. Like, it's okay. You're gonna get out of the slump." So that's a real kinda more recently, I've been doing a lot of, posture and visualization work, um, and that seems it can be like an entree into change as opposed to just talking it out.
Yeah, I love that. Do you ever like review footage of them like doing their sport? Like I know coaches will do that, right? Or they'll watch like someone pitch or do a lift or whatever.
Yeah, if I have access to that, for sure. Yeah. Or if ideally, if I can even be on site and watch them practice, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. What do you see like yeah in the moment when they're performing, when they're doing the sport?
Yeah, for example, like a baseball player is up to bat, like I did my, master's thesis with some high school baseball students who were in batting slumps, but they were, like, good players, and I watched them, and you can just see. And if you play a sport long enough, like, even, like, with golf or some of these sports where it's really based on, kinda aim and accuracy, and it's not like a super, physically intense sport. I don't know if you've noticed this, Mark, but, like, sometimes you can see, like, they're not gonna make that. They're not gonna make that shot. You can just read it, you know? And there's subtle little things like, more of a defensive posture or eye contact, um, uh, chest puffed up or kind of more in retreat. Is real subtle things like that, and it's on a real primal level, so if you're up to bat, it's really you against the pitcher, and if you're intimidated, you can see it in the posture, and your chances of getting hit with that posture, obviously, there's psychology behind the posture, the chances of getting hit are low, so you need to prime yourself and get up to bat, and it makes me think back to when I was working with these high school students. I, maybe it was a little controversial at the time, but if we're talking, like, men's style of therapy, I said, Pretend you wanna, like, basically kill and destroy that pitcher." Right? Yeah, and I was like, "I know you don't really want to, right? Don't get in a fight, but, like, that guy, like, wants you to lose. I want you to show him that you're better and that you're basically, like." And what's funny about this is when I did this at a baseball practice, the batter hit a line drive right at the pitcher. Like, got out of his slump and just nailed it, like, right towards the pitcher, and, like, fortunately, there was, like, a cage protecting because it was practice, but, like, the coach was like, "Whoa," and you could tell the kid he was just giddy. He's like, "I got my fire back," you know? But it was, like, literally, like, the first pitch after I told him to, like, kill the pitcher, he totally connects, like, "Whoa, okay." So, it obviously, you can tell I love doing this stuff. It's just I love helping people get their fire back like that, and, we're talking about men's therapy too. It's like, that is just such a guy thing, like, I almost hit the pitcher, and it was a little bit of danger. Obviously, there's, like, a cage there, but everyone laughed, and it was just changed the vibe of everything, like, "Oh, we're playing, like, hardball, and we might get a little bit brushed up here," and then that's we love that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I really enjoy that story because, and it's also like, yeah, there's a little bit of violence, there's a little bit of like aggression, right? It's like you're mobilizing these like primal masculine energies, and I want to talk to you about that in more detail because, I mentioned on the show before for listeners, and in my work is like I call those like dark side motivations, right? And I think like our industry doesn't talk about those enough, and it shames them. When you think of like sports, and please correct me because it's your domain, it's like, yeah, you want to be like the love of the game or everything being this kind of like altruistic, like super high level motivator, right? And like, yeah, we want to get there, right? We definitely want to get there. But I think for a lot of men, I think especially young men, like anger, vengeance, pride, ego, like if that gets the fire started, I think there's a lot of value in that, because it's like it gets that flywheel going, and then you could do the cleanup on the back end. But I think there's like a lot of power in those like dark side motivations just to, yeah, get someone out of a slump or, in my work, we kind of more mental health, like getting someone like out of the depression, or out of an addiction. It's like, okay, maybe you want to do it because you want to be like hot and date people. Great. Like, don't hold yourself to this like spiritual value that you're not ready for, like do it for a shitty reason. At least you're doing it and, pick up the piece on the other side. Right.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Yeah, just get that going, and like you said, pick up the pieces on the other side. You don't wanna be a psycho, of course, but, like, to be real, like, we do have that energy and those thoughts of, like, "I wanna, like, kill this guy." Like, you don't do it, but, like, to deny it and go, "Well, I'm gonna be spiritual." It's like, no, maybe you just really wanna destroy somebody in a competition, and it's just a game, but, like, we're wired that way. We're wired to be predators. We're wired to go hunting, wired fight or flight, so if you deny that just sort of physical reality, it gets bottled up, you get ashamed of it, all these things. But if you can just be true to it in a proper venue, either like martial arts or whatever it is, or it is a game and it's controlled, but you get that aggression out. Like, let's be honest about it. It feels good to get that aggression out.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like, men, human men specifically, right? Like, we are the apex predator of planet Earth. Right? We have dominated every other creature on the planet and, like, conquered the world. So, like, to deny that now is crazy. It's crazy, and I'm with you. It's like, obviously, don't, like, beat your kids or, abuse your wife, but we have these outlets like martial arts, For me, it's like weightlifting. Like, I say that, like, I think guys need to have something where they can go all out and just go full primal. Whether that is like blasting a ball right as it's coming towards you, right? Or golf or, biking, right? Like where you can just like really just let it loose. Because I do think that is so much in our physiology that we need those outlets. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we evolved to do. It's like that's why we have testosterone. That's why we, have this limbic system. Like we're wired that way. So don't deny it. Even like, clients I work with who aren't really athletic, I get them on an exercise program. Like I'm somewhat prescriptive in things. Like I say like you need to do some exercise, some sort of a routine. And it's just overall good for you. It gets those neurotransmitters going. It buffers all the stress hormones. Like, yeah, I got to do some exercise.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think it's like I remember learning in my undergrad. It's like exercise, sleep, meditation, diet. Right? There's some things that are just like only positive. It's like you should just do those. The research is just really really strong on that. I'm curious for those guys. You said you also work with like workaholics, right? Um, do you find that aggression comes out there too? Right, it comes out in the professional realm.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So, high achieving business people where like their business is their sport or they're an executive and that's their sport and they have so much pride around that and they really are good at it. But it can be this bit of a drug. So workaholism. So that maybe relationships are suffering, but what do? They go and they work until, 1 in the morning because that's their comfort zone, that's their confidence zone, and so that they just feel can be a form of avoidance, and aggression can come out too. They can maybe, I see this with people I work with, maybe, again, if their relationships are not going well, they might be a little bit more aggressive in the boardroom because they're kind of compensating for that lack of confidence in a relationship, so they might overdo it, like, in the boardroom. Definitely see stuff like that. Um, but it's like, I think men do need to have that sort of performance and that aggression or whatever it is with, like, achievement, and it doesn't have to be athletic, doesn't have to be in business, but there has to be some sort of a creative thing that we're building. Like, we like to build and create things and perform and and do something in that way. So to answer your question, like workaholism is a common problem. We get messages from society too, um, from men like how much money are you making? How much are you achieving? How much are you working? The grind, things like that. I work 18 hours a day. Like now I'm okay as long as I do that. Right? I feel like if we had a camera on you and watched those 18 hours, like what are you actually doing? Are you being busy? Right? Is this, this can be a pitfall, this, working too much for sure.
Yeah, tell me more about that. We talked a little bit on your show about like kind of the hustle culture, right? And this idea of like, wake up and grind and, it's all about raw power. And I work with a number of guys, I used to be based in Boulder. Now I'm up in small mountain town, Evergreen, but I have a lot of Boulder clients. And that's like a huge hub for tech and for startups and for this culture, right? Of just pedal to the metal. And I work with a lot of guys who are geniuses, truly, like brilliant people, incredible education, and they've done everything right in their mind, right? They've like gotten a job, they've like bought the house, they're living in one of like those beautiful places on planet Earth, but they're miserable. Many of them are still single, they struggle in relationships, many of them have like kind of secret addictions, whether that's drinking too much or I see a lot of guys with video game or porn addictions, like their emotional world is falling apart and they're pissed, right? They're pissed because they did everything right. They followed all those things that you're talking about, all those cultural messages. Like, they look really good on paper, better than I do, you know? But, like, they're not happy. So can you speak to that archetype? I imagine you worked with a number of those guys as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, see, on paper, they're looking great. Their net worth is high. They did all the right things, like you say, but there's something like they're miserable. So why? So so what is it? So what's the are you able to enjoy where you're at right now and appreciate that? I find with a lot of these guys that you describe kind of this archetype is that there's this absence of gratitude, absence of appreciation, absence of even giving themselves credit. That like, not that you've, arrived, but like enjoy the day. Like look around. Like there's so much beauty in what's going on in your life right now. Yet you're not appreciating it. You're still striving and comparing. Like it's not enough. It's like that famous line of the movie Wall Street, if you remember that movie with Michael Douglas. You know, "How much is enough? How much is enough?" And he's like, "It's never enough," and he kinda goes into this infantile sort of rage, "It's never enough." And what that, I think, comes down to more is, like, I'm never enough, right? So that I can't even just relax and just be proud of myself, because if I do that, then, you know, yeah, I'm not enough, so why would I do that? Why would I relax, and why would I be appreciative, and why would I feel gratitude because my identity is I'm never gonna be enough. So it's like I have to suffer. I just think it becomes a habit. I think that, this archetype that you described, like, they never get a taste of that, of just relaxing and enjoying the sunshine or, you know, hanging out in wilderness, like, eh but I think if they get a taste of that and realize they can have all this other stuff on paper at the same time, then, like, things start to open up. But, like, if you're working in therapy with these guys, and I know have these retreats and things like that, I think you have to have an experiential thing where the man is able to get a taste of what it's like with a different paradigm. I mean, talking about it, like, with talk therapy, definitely, it helps, but, like, part of my approach is I do prescribe things to people. Like, go out in the real world, like, go to Wyoming and, you know, do a dude ranch experience, right? It's like you got the money, like, go do it, right? And oftentimes that'll open up, like, just this pipeline, like, "Oh my god," like, it was just I wasn't worried about work, I was, wrangling horses, like, wow, it just felt great. I was like, "Awesome, you got a taste of that. Now bring that into your regular life, and how can you iterate experiences like that are on the calendar so you don't fall back into that grind mode again?" Um, so I like to help, guys out with some structure in their life where they're able to visit different different places and different, experiences and not get stuck in that workaholic mode. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, right? Like, just having that, how you said, lived experience and letting your nervous system really tap into a different frequency in a way. I wanna just, yeah, keep digging on this with you because I just see it being so pervasive, and maybe it's because many of my clients that, are attracted to me are in that kind of, like, family building provider phase. They're, new parents or they're about to be parents, and I think life comes at you fast and bills come at you fast at that age. But there's that sense of, like, deep scarcity within them, like you're just saying, like, that never enoughness, and you try to recommend, "Hey, go to a dude ranch," and you get, a wave of excuses. "Oh, I can't take time away. My wife would be mad at me. My kids need me." Like, there's just, like, all this kind of, like, I mean, to your point, like, addict mind stuff, right? Just, like, any whatever, shit sticks to the wall. So how do you do that? I don't know, like, I mean, how do you, like, break through all those defenses in a way? I'm sure it's not a simple answer, but, I'm curious, like, yeah, that deep level of scarcity and that, like, kind of urgency that I see a lot of these guys are carrying around every single day. It's incredibly painful for them.
Yeah. Oftentimes I'll ask them, like, why do you think you operate this way? Why do you think this is your philosophy? Where do you think you learned that? Where does that come from? Um, and oftentimes it is, society messages, but it could be relationship with your parents or your siblings and exploring that. Like, where did you learn? Where was the training such that you believe that you always have to be doing and planning and building and you never get to enjoy the feast, right? Like, where did this come from? And, investigating that. And oftentimes it is about like father-son relationships, right? My dad never had that connection with him, or he always criticized me, or maybe my mom criticized me. But we try to find like that original training and unpack that. And oftentimes that's like a breakthrough there because they get the insight and they realize that, oh, this is why I do it. This is why I do it. And even going back further, let's say like my dad would never acknowledge my accomplishments, then I might ask them, well, where do you think your dad learned that you don't get close to your son? Oh, well, actually, my dad always complained about his grandfather being really, aloof and distant and working all the time and never came home. Like, oh, interesting, right? Um, so that opens up something there. Just the insight in itself can be really powerful because now it's no longer a mystery. You're not running on this like computer program. Like, oh, I see the programming. I get it, and that helps a lot. Um, but yeah, it's really common. And it's just I love helping people unravel that mystery, and oftentimes the client can figure it out themselves, and I don't have to come up with the solution. I'm just like, "Let's let's have the courage to dive deeper. It's scary, but let's figure this out." And then, a therapy environment is a great place to explore that.
Yeah, I agree, and I find that once they get that kind of emotional release and they can see the matrix, they can start to practice different things, and to listeners out there that are, perhaps struggling with this, it's terrifying. I don't think we're gonna sugarcoat it on this show. It's like, it is terrifying because it can feel like such a paradigm shift, and it can feel like you're neglecting your life. A lot of these guys, if they're not constantly monitoring their email or, checking or being available on the phone, they have these deep feelings. I mean, and some of it could be true, right? That, like, they're gonna lose their job or, they're not gonna be on that cutting edge of whatever their industry is.
Yeah. Another thing I do in my therapy is I'll assign, experiments. So I use a lot of, like, cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'll give them like, a low stakes experiment. Let's say that they, are answering all their emails at work, and they're always on Slack and all this stuff, and I'll say, "Let's try an experiment. How about tomorrow you choose, like, 2 low stakes situations to, ignore," right? A request comes in, and I want you to not do anything about it for an hour, but just choose something low stakes. And again, it's that experiential thing, and you can talk about it forever, but unless you actually try it in the real world, and they'll try some low stakes stuff and they'll say, I did it, but it was super uncomfortable. Like I felt like I was losing control, but they did it. So now they have the experience and the confidence to try it again. So I like doing little experiments like that. It seems to be helpful with the confidence to make that paradigm shift.
Yeah, and I think I was trained psychoanalysis, and kind of the first goal of therapy and psychoanalysis is to convince the client that the unconscious is real, right? Like, just get that baseline of like assuming you're not in control. So I like that example because it's like, yeah, it's a low stakes thing. It's like, you're not responding. You're the first one to respond to a Slack message, but you're losing your shit, right? You're like sweating, you're panting, you think you're going to lose your job. Like, it is a, hysterical reaction, right? It is like not, you know, it's not rational compared to, like, what is actually happening. And I think once people get that experience, they're like, "Oh my god, there is something here." This, like, weirdo that I've been talking to online, he actually has something to say, because it doesn't make sense that not responding to a message for an hour, like, caused me to completely deregulate, and, like, drink 5 beers after work, right? Like, I think guys need that kind of, like, really powerful mirror to be able to recognize that there is something more going on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I almost wish I would have been trained in psychoanalysis. Like I talked to other therapists who are trained in that area. Um, because it is really powerful in this, the subconscious and the unconscious, like it does. That's like the program, right? But if you tap into it, like you said, the matrix and you can see it, it's just so I think empowering. Like, oh my God, I can like retrain myself. Right. And, I did this little experiment and I was sweating and like the world didn't collapse, but I felt all like it was. Like that's powerful stuff. And it's interesting, like it's part awareness and diving deep and delving into the dark parts, but then it's also like you can know and not do, right? So then there's that thing of like, how can we install habits into your day where you meditate every morning or you do something so that you don't slip back to the old pattern because that old programming, even if you have like all the insight, like, oh, now I know what makes me tick, like I've got this, right? It's like, well, sure, but if you get a little stressed out, you might default to the old program and then you're just like Neo stuck in the matrix again, right?
Yeah, the unconscious still wins, right? Like, it's like never underestimate its power. But yeah, I like that you work in that way, right? And I imagine it comes a lot from coaching too. I think that's what our industry, especially with men, needs to embrace a lot more of is coaching methodology is exactly what you're talking about, right? Of like, do shit in the real world. Have those, analysis we call it corrected experience, right? Have those corrected experiences where you are truly retraining your brain and body and physiology to be like, oh, my life didn't fall apart, or I am stronger than I think I am, or I can overcome this fear. Because I feel like our industry doesn't do that. It's a lot of like navel gazing. I think that turns away a lot of guys.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, guys, generally, we like to be problem solvers. We like to get stuff done. We like to feel like we're accomplishing things. Um, so if you can assign tasks for them to do in the real world, try this experiment, like with your boss or with this email. They get that confidence. Or how does it feel to exercise every day for a whole week and get up at 5 a.m.? Like, God, it was hard, but I feel fantastic. It's like great. Um, so it's a challenge as like a therapist or coach is, as I'm sure you know, it's like doing it in the real world at a sustained length of time. And I'll speak for myself too, like, uh, there's times I catch myself off my game. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I know I need to I skipped exercise, I know I should." But then I don't the next day I skip again, like, I think that I've got it all I'm above it all, right? Because like, I know all this stuff, but then I'll fall in the trap too, right? Um So, like, really good daily habits, really good weekly habits, quarterly habits, yearly habits. Have you taken a vacation this year? Like, you gotta do all the stuff that just keeps you feeling good. It can't just all be conceptual.
Definitely. No, yeah, I agree, wholeheartedly. Like, similar, I can struggle with that too. And the method I use for myself is like, I say, I got to keep the monkey happy, like just like the monkey that is my body. It just needs to exercise and it needs to like go on vacation, needs to like eat well. And even though we can be these like, big brain or like spiritual entities, like it doesn't matter because the monkey still needs to be happy, right? Like the body still needs to be happy. And without that, the whole thing just goes off the rails.
I like that analogy. I'm gonna steal that from you. Keep the monkey happy.
Keep the monkey happy. Yeah, it just needs stupid monkey shit. But like it needs it pretty consistently, you know?
I mean, that's the way we're this is the vessel we're in, right? We're like in a primate vessel with a, you know, big brain, so deal with it, right?
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I'm curious if you work with this population or not, but to kind of do a 180, do you work with like low performing men? Right. So like guys that either are struggling with depression or maybe like a failure to launch teen or young adult, or somebody that is really stuck in a rut and has trouble doing anything. Maybe someone that's really overweight, working with like a binge eating disorder. Like, do you work with that of the other end of the spectrum?
I used to earlier on in my therapy career when I first started my practice, but I kept getting more and more men who were kind of like me, I guess reading, like, the bio on my website, they resonated more with me, so I just started getting more of these, high performing type A folks, but working with, say, a quote, unquote, "lower performing men," or maybe feeling, more depressive aspects, um, I think the thing there is a lot of nurturing and a lot of just, like, a lot of compassion, so shifting into that is I think it really it's hard for me, I'll just speak for myself as a therapist to have that patience of just nurturing someone, um, and then also, you do wanna get them out of that sort of depressive rut, and you do want to assign tasks, but you have to really build it slow and really get the confidence going. So it's a lot of, like, watering the plant, you know? A lot of that. You've heard of the term, like, concept of, like, reparenting also? Right? So it's that I think it's a longer game and longer work, and you have to, as a therapist, have to be more patient with folks who are maybe feeling a little more on the depressed side or more in a rut or don't have that, you know, aggressive fire in them as much as other men. It's possible, but, this is the clientele I work with, they gravitate toward me. I like it. It works. So
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's true. It's like, I mean, I work with them too, but I'm similar to you. I work better with like higher vibration, right? So like I like anxiety, I like anger, even like, some taste of bipolar, right? Like I can hang with all of that. The lower, like it's harder. I think it's a lot slower. And a lot of those needs are younger. I mean, sometimes they're even like pre-verbal or like infantile, where they need a lot of like, holding, right, and attention and motivation. They're not quite ready for the tough love piece because their trauma often happened very, very early in life.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of a client a number of years ago where, I won't expose too much identifying information, but client got a dog, and there there was a game changer, right? So, like, more of, like, on the depressive end of things, and I was younger in my career, and I was kinda being more of a cheerleader, and then, like, he got a dog, and, like, things were good 'cause he needed that more of just unconditional love, just being present. So, sometimes it's stuff as simple as that, as, like, getting a pet or going to a dude ranch or something like sometimes the solution is just simpler than we as therapists might think.
For sure, yeah, like, you just probably just need that, right? Just need that love, like you said, and something to take care of, something that was more dependent than he was, right? Because I think it does push people into that mentor, caregiver role, whether you like it or not. Because the pets are cute, and you don't want to suffer, so it kind of forces a growing up process, I'd imagine, too.
Yeah. Well, we had talked about this, Mark, on my podcast yesterday. This your model of like men wanting to be a guide, right? So getting that level of being a guide in your identity. And so if someone can have a dog, you're like a guide in a way for that dog. And that feels that part of like men really like to do that. Like I want to be in charge of something. I want to, you know, let's go for a walk, dog, right? So it's like on a certain level, like you're that guide, and that I think that fills a part for men too, for sure.
Yeah, I think they get to be that guy. They get to experience power. They get to experience like fatherhood and those paternal instincts, which again are deeply masculine. Like what's more masculine than being a dad? So I think that there's something there that kind of awakens that in men. So I'm curious. Back to kind of you and athletes, right? Like, and I think I guess you're an example of this. Frankly, is like the kind of like second career athlete. Right, somebody that, like, had a great run at it, maybe played college sports or, was semi-pro or something, but now, they get older and, you're not as competitive anymore, and how do you help guys make that transition? Because I have to imagine that's very difficult. Like, I liken it, almost to, like, a veteran coming back from the army where you get, like, really good at one thing, but that one thing, like, actually isn't that relevant in the greater world, you know?
Yeah, that's a tough transition, and I speak from experience. Like I was a bike racer until I was about 25. Was essentially professional at it, um, and making that transition to the quote unquote real world, right? It's it's an identity shift. It really is, and there's some like natural sort of depression that goes on for athletes when they're switching over, or let's say that their career ended with an injury, like even worse, right? Where you're forced to, pivot into something else. There's a lot to grapple with there. And I think when I work with athletes like that who are either been injured and forced to quit or are, aged out or whatever it is, um, I want to keep them busy. So I definitely want them to pivot into something that they like. But I don't want them to be inactive and moping, and because they're going from, like, 100 miles an hour to nothing, and, like, I wanna keep them active, either doing some other sport or traveling or just, like, keeping busy because they can get down into that slump and just really ruminate on what I've lost. So that's part of my technique is, like, let's keep you busy. Let's keep you networking. Let's keep you curious. Like, um, and then they're naturally gonna gravitate towards something. Uh, but I do find it really common with, athletes at a high level if they don't really have a plan after they retire from their sport, or they don't think about it enough. So what I like to do working with athletes who are active in their sport, and maybe they're professional or at a high level, I talk about, what do you wanna be doing in 20 years? What do you wanna be doing in 10 years from now? Let's work our way backwards. What can you do right now in your sport to start building your brand? Can you do some coaching? Can you be a guide now? Like, let's get you thinking about your transition into the real world as opposed to just kind of ignoring it. And that can be really empowering. And honestly, then I see the results even get better. It's weird, like they'll be spending more time maybe coaching younger players or actually building their social media brand. Like, oh, I don't have time. But then when they do it, they start getting even better results because there's that part of them that's kind of a lot more secure. Like, oh, I do have a plan after my sport. So I love doing that, helping athletes build their brand too.
That's interesting. Just some like tips you have for that. Like if someone wants to build out a brand or, yeah, become more vocal or get paid to do what they love. I imagine for some people, right? Like I my assumption is without that type of business side hustle, it's very difficult to survive on an athlete's income. Because also the gear is expensive. They think of biking and stuff, right? Like it's expensive.
I do tap into that sort of more spiritual, sort of mission-oriented things, like, um, and I asked them, like, when you, say, win a race or hit a home run or even you're at bat and you get a base hit or let's say you strike out, like, there's people watching you, right? And whether you like it or not, you're their role model. Like, they're gonna look to you, they're gonna admire you if you're playing at a high level and in a big venue, and how do you wanna leverage that? Do you wanna maybe build a website and talk about your passion for baseball, for example, and really amplify you being a role model or a guide? So we're talking about this guide archetype, right? Like, I think men really like that. They may be afraid to have that responsibility, but then when they get it, there's something that kinda shifts in them. So I worked with an athlete where I really encouraged him to build a website. It's like, "You look great on camera, like, you have flawless technique." It's like, I don't have time, I'm embarrassed." And it's like, "No, we need to brand you," right? And then he kinda got into it. It's like, "Oh, I like this. This is cool," right? Like, I'm getting more and more messages, and it's like, yeah, I like to push people to that of, like, you are whether you like it or not, you're a role model, and you can amplify your message in a positive way as opposed to being quiet and in the background, you know?
Yeah, and you can put like, yeah, like good out into the world and use that platform, right, for good, whether it's talking about the sport or mental health or, supporting a cause, right? I know a lot of athletes like, are biking for certain causes or whatever, right? They're like using their visibility to help people, which is I think very admirable.
Yeah, yeah. Like, maybe you can start a charity. I'll think about, like, LeBron James and what he does in Ohio where he grew up, and he has, like pours all this money into education. Like, that's awesome. Like, can you start to think that way as an athlete younger in your career? And you gotta do something because you can't play for you can play forever, but you can't you can't make, money at it forever, right?
Right. It's not a career forever. I'm curious for a lot of these athletes, like, how do they function in a relationship? You know, I guess the assumption I would make is that some of this more like perfectionism or performance based, framework comes into love. Is that true, or what do you see what happens when they decide to start dating and making, building a family?
Yeah, you can definitely if they have, say, perfectionistic traits in their sport, or there's something that's sort of maladaptive in their sport, you can see that generalize into relationships too, for sure. And, yeah, relationships are just really rich data for seeing if there's something going wrong in your life, right?
Or
Um,
mirror? Do they,
yeah, it's like, "Oh,
know,
okay, I'm having problems." Yeah. So that's the biggest mirror for sure. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, there are athletes who have, really good healthy attitudes about their sport, and then their relationships seem to be doing pretty well, loving relationships, flexible. So yeah, that's the biggest mirror. So sometimes I might have someone come to me in psychotherapy, relationship issue, and they're an athlete, and we talk about that mirror. Like, well, maybe you're pretty hard on yourself, and maybe you don't forgive yourself, and maybe you have a strong inner critic. That's why you're arguing so much with your spouse, right? That's pretty typical. Yeah.
yeah, I imagine it bleeds out. Another, you talked about this kind of, the little league dad earlier. And I'm actually thinking about a specific client as I'm talking about this, who is not that guy. He's not that aggressive, but he's worried about being that aggressive. And he's worried about like pushing his kid harder. And, his kid is, in this case study, it's his kid is like, 9, 10. So just kind of beginning in this thing. And, he's struggling on like how tough to be. Like, if the kid doesn't wanna go to practice, do you say, like, "It's okay, I validate your feelings," or you say, "Get in the car and I'll take you to practice?" Like, I guess to kind of hone in on the question is any advice you have for fathers in particular on how to do this in a healthier way with their sons? We'll keep it kind of this paternal line. Like, how do you coach your child and work with your child when they're getting into little league or T-ball or, whatever it is?
Right. I think you have to be honest, like, does my kid really actually like the sport? So there's a difference between I don't wanna go to practice because I had a bad game and I'm in a rut, but what I really need for you, dad, is to push me to go to practice. So there's a difference between that and the kid never liked, say, baseball from the start at all, and just consistently does not like it. right? And being honest there. Um, so it's tricky. It's tricky because you can be, that vicarious little league dad, and let's say your kid is much more into books and reading and science and just really just hates sports. And they it's been a couple months and they still hate it. You gotta be honest, like, right. But then there's that tricky part of like the tough love. Yeah, you're going to practice, right? "No, I hate baseball, I hate you," right? It's like, we'll talk about this later, you're going to practice, and that sends a message of like, "I got you, son, like, I know what you need, go to practice." So it's definitely tricky, and then also, like, there's sometimes the moms can get involved too and be protective and like, "No, Junior doesn't wanna go to practice," right? And how do you negotiate that? Um, so it's definitely challenging being a dad of a kid who's an athlete. I think the main thing is paying attention to you can tell whether they like what they're doing or not. Like, you got enough info on that, and you gotta be really honest about that.
Yeah. So it sounds like, yeah, looking and seeing if they're enjoying it, if they want to practice in their spare time, probably if they're like watching the sport, like if they're engaged in more aspects of it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not a father. I'm hoping to be soon. And I just, as I think about that more and talk to more experts, it's like, God, that's such an art form. I mean, it's such a spiritual practice in many ways and such a like, seems like a very difficult thing to do. Um, because yeah, it's like, how do you balance being that hard ass and not being an asshole? You know? And I think as men, especially now, we talked about on your show too, it's like, I think it's really confusing. Right? I think it's so polarized out there where certain parts of the population want guys to be these, like, very feminine, doormat, just totally loving, safe people, and then the other side wants us to be like bullies, and just, like, be totally machismo and, buy a bunch of guns and go crazy, right? So I think it's really difficult out there for fathers raising the next generation of, like, what does a healthy man even look like?
Yeah. No, it's tricky because 'cause they're all these messages like, "Oh, you're going hunting with your kid? Oh, you're just like you're evil." It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with, like, going deer hunting and killing and eating the meat, like, that's what we've done for thousands of years, and maybe a kid wants to do that, right? But if the kid really doesn't like hunting, like, absolutely hates it, like, maybe not force him to do it, right? So it's definitely tricky. Um, but there's also that sort of like that message that the kid gets of even if you're, as a dad, pushing him to do something, it shows that you care, and they may not like it, but it's like, "Oh, dad cares enough to kind of push me to go to practice." Um, but I think one of the big things I've seen and I used to work in high schools too and would hear stories about, like, really some pretty tough dads, like, really conditional love, like, you know, um, don't 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 show that don't have that conditional love of, like and that's really, like, a big pitfall for being, like, a dad who has a son who's in sports is, like, sometimes they need space, right? And allow them to process, say, maybe they had a losing game, like, they'll give them some time to process on their own, like, because that's what they're gonna have to do later, let's say, again, at pro sports. They're gonna have to process stuff on their own. They're not gonna have dad there telling them what to do all the time. So, yeah, I mean, it's an art. It's tricky, and you just gotta be careful not to be that dad who's, you know, we're taking away all your privileges because you struck out. Like, yeah, no, don't do that.
Don't do that one.
That's not gonna help. It's not gonna help anybody. Yeah.
Well, so, as we're wrapping up the show, I kind of got a final question for you, which is if we have a listener that's, following along with the show and they're, an athlete or they're a father or they're a workaholic, high performance dude that we've talked about, how would they know when to seek help? Like some symptoms or some behaviors or some patterns that you could name that's like, okay, I should, talk to someone like Michael.
Yeah. Well, we could go back to, the DSM manual, like, of diagnoses, right? Oftentimes, I don't wanna make it clinical, but, like, in a way, like, if you can be in a rut for, like, 2 weeks, right? But after 2 weeks, then we diagnose as depression if we do diagnoses, so I would say if you're feeling out of sorts for more than 2 weeks, like there's something going on there, and you may want to use this as an opportunity to learn more about yourself and investigate things. And also, if this is cyclical, that keeps coming back, right? Um, you might want to check it out. And then also, just more importantly, like it's okay to get help. And if you think about therapy more of like having a coach, like Michael Jordan had a coach, right? The top athletes in the world have coaches. There's no exception to that. So, did they ask for help? Sure. Did Shaquille O'Neal, when he was a terrible free throw shooter and he would completely miss the rim at free throw shots, what did he do? He got a mental coach, right? And he took care of it. So, if the top can do it, ask for help, then you can do it. So that would be my selling strategy right there.
Nice. English well said. So yeah, Michael, where can people learn more about you online if they want to follow you and engage with what you put out there?
Yeah. Best place to find me is michaelceely.com. So my last name is spelled Ceely. And on that site, I have all my social stuff. I do a lot on Instagram too. I also am a therapist on California, Florida, and Wisconsin. And you can find out more. Just Google my name. All that stuff comes up. So
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
yeah, Marcus, pleasure talking with you. I love talking about this stuff. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And listeners, thanks for tuning in. All of Michael's links will be in our show notes. So go ahead and click the description of the podcast. You'll see links to all of his websites and social and all that kind of stuff. Check it out, especially, if you're in this niche. I think there's a really unique niche of high performers. Check out the High Performance Podcast. There's a lot of really great stuff there to just like, if you're on the fence of going to therapy, just start learning, just start learning and see if anything resonates with you. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Do the socials for us, like, share, subscribe, especially if there's someone that you think would really benefit from this show, an athlete in your life or a father that's raising an athlete or something like that, someone that's working a little bit too much, kick them over this episode so they can hear this conversation. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.